Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a really fascinating stack of source material. It offers a detailed breakdown of a high-profile legal battle that's captivated both entertainment and legal circles. Our mission for this deep dive is, to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge. We're looking at court proceedings, complex legal instructions, and the intense, sometimes surprising dynamics unfolding inside that jury room. We're going to try and cut through the headlines, the noise, help you understand the intricate arguments, the huge task facing the jury, and, the very human element behind all the legal jargon.
Indeed. And we'll be looking closely at the ongoing deliberations in the Combs trial. It's a case that truly highlights the immense complexities of justice when it plays out under that, unforgiving glare of public scrutiny. It's really a fascinating look at how these abstract legal principles collide with very real, very human stories.
Okay, right. Let's unpack this then. So we begin by setting the stage. Our source material describes it as week number 8, trial day number 33 of the Combs trial. I mean, this isn't just another court case, is it? It's a legal marathon. And at its heart, it really lies this dramatic clash of two very different stories being told to the jury. It's a real battle of narratives where the truth itself almost feels like it's on trial. So on one side, you have the prosecution. They've meticulously painted Combs as the, quote, ringleader of a criminal empire. An enterprise, they argue, built on a foundation of abuse, manipulation, the use of illegal substances, and systematic coercion. This alleged pattern of behavior, our sources reveal, it extends far beyond just the music industry. It delves, quote, behind closed doors with women like Cassie, Jane, Mia, and Capricorn Clark. The accusations presented in court include some, frankly, chilling descriptions of disturbing patterns of coercive encounters, specific threats, references to blackmails with tapes, and women allegedly being, quote, groomed or scared into complying with demands. It's really a narrative designed to show a deliberate, organized scheme.
Yeah, what's truly fascinating here, from a legal strategy perspective, is how the defense has attempted to just fundamentally flip that narrative, completely turn it on its head. They argue this entire case is nothing more than a, quote, mischaracterization of personal relationships, wild lifestyles, and clout chasing. For the defense, this isn't a crime ring at all. It's just a messy, complicated situation rooted in, quote, love, jealousy, and yes, some freaky behavior, but certainly not RICO.
Right, RICO. And maybe we should just quickly clarify for anyone listening. RICO is the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. It's a powerful federal law designed to target and dismantle entire criminal enterprises, not just sort of individual bad acts, right?
Exactly. It's a big gun in the prosecutor's arsenal. And the defense has even gone so far as to try and, quote, downplay the videos and texts presented by the prosecution. They're asserting that Combs is, quote, just a businessman in love, not a criminal mastermind. It's a classic defense strategy, really. Try to reframe any bad acts as just personal failings, not actual criminal intent.
But the prosecution, they weren't letting that stand unchallenged. In their rebuttal, they really snapped back, powerfully asserting that these women were indeed, quote, coerced, traumatized, and manipulated. And that even when they might have seemed to say yes, the prosecution argued unequivocally, quote, came from fear or control, not consent. Our source indicates the prosecution reminded the jury of, quote, violent coercive encounters, bribed security, and the insidious nature of trauma bonds that allegedly kept these women silent for years. It's just a stark reminder of the human cost at the core of these allegations.
Yeah, it really is. And this truly sets up the central, absolutely monumental question for the jury, doesn't it? Will they ultimately believe this was simply love gone wrong in a wild lifestyle, as the defense suggests? Or will they see it as a sophisticated criminal enterprise hiding behind fame and fortune, which is the prosecution's case? The weight of that decision is now squarely on their shoulders. Deliberations are officially underway. It's the ultimate test of where the facts lead them.
Okay, so after hearing these deeply conflicting narratives, the jury was sent off to deliberate. They had the weekend off, which, maybe gave them a chance to clear their heads a bit. But they officially began their deliberations today. And our source dives deep into what happened on trial day 33, specifically focusing on the lengthy yet absolutely crucial instructions given by Judge Subroman. It's formally known as the charge. And this isn't just a brief recap, right? It's the legal roadmap for everything that follows.
Exactly. It's fundamental.
The judge emphasized right at the outset that, quote, evidence is the testimony, the answers, and the exhibits. And crucially, quote, arguments are not evidence. Now, that might sound basic, but it's such a fundamental distinction. Juries have to grasp this, especially in a high-profile case like this one where, let's face it, media narratives and public speculation often blur the lines between what was said in court versus what was actually proven.
Absolutely.
The jury, he reminded them, are the, quote, sole and exclusive arbiters of the facts. Their job is to find the truth, only the truth, based solely on what was formally presented.
Which, raises an incredibly important question for us. How does a jury, made up of ordinary citizens, make sense of such complex legal terms, and then apply them to what must be a mountain of evidence?
Right.
Well, the judge, according to our sources, meticulously laid out 5 formal charges against Combs. The cornerstone, and probably the most complex, is count 1, that broad racketeering enterprise alleged to have operated from 2004 all the way to 2024. 2 decades.
Wow.
For this IARCO charge, the United States isn't just proving individual crimes, they're trying to show a sustained conspiracy.
Yeah.
And the real insight here is how IARCO allows them to tie together seemingly disparate acts over that huge period, painting a picture of a full-blown criminal enterprise rather than just isolated incidents. So they have to prove an agreement between 2 or more individuals, and crucially, that Combs joined it and committed, quote, at least 2 predicate acts, these underlying crimes. And the judge even clarified that this mutual understanding to cooperate doesn't need to be explicitly stated. It, quote, can be inferred from the circumstances of this case. Actions may speak louder than words.
That's powerful.
It is. It's a very powerful tool for prosecutors.
And beyond that overarching RICO charge, there are also the specific counts, right? Focusing on alleged intercourse and prostitution-related activities. Counts 2 and 4, for instance, allege intercourse trafficking involving Cassandra Ventura and Jane, spanning significant periods 2009 to 2018 for Ms. Ventura and 2019 to 2024 for Jane.
Long stretches of time.
Yeah, and counts 3 and 5 mirror these, but they specifically focus on, quote, transporting individuals for the purpose of prostitution, highlighting the alleged movement of victims across state or even national lines. These are highly specific charges that demand, precise legal understanding from the jury.
And that precision is exactly what the judge tried to provide. Our source goes into quite a bit of detail about the very specific definitions given for these complex legal terms. For example, attempt. It isn't just trying something. It requires a specific intent to commit a crime and a, quote, substantial step towards its commission.
Okay.
Aiding and abetting means, quote, knowingly doing some act to aid or encourage a crime. And regarding the 8 alleged predicate acts for RICO, which include really grave offenses like kidnapping, arson, bribery, witness tampering, forced labor, intercourse trafficking, transportation for prostitution, and intent to distribute narcotics, the judge clarified some crucial nuances.
Such as?
Well, for instance, kidnapping does not occur if the victim consented. But importantly, quote, consent may be withdrawn at any point. And if movement continues after that withdrawal, it, quote, may then become forced labor.
That distinction is vital.
Absolutely vital for the jury to grasp. And for intercourse trafficking, even the term transport has a precise legal meaning, quote, to take or convey from one place to another. And here's where it gets really impactful. The judge stated that, quote, reckless disregard satisfies the statute.
Meaning what?
Meaning even a, quote, deliberate closing of eyes to what's happening could be enough for a conviction under that charge.
Wow.
Yeah. And prostitution itself, for the purpose of this trial, was defined simply as, quote, engaging in sexual activity for money or its equivalents. These incredibly detailed definitions. This is what the jury now has to take and apply to every piece of testimony, every exhibit they saw.
And it gets, I think, really interesting here. Beyond just the definitions of the charges themselves, the judge also gave very specific instructions on how the jury should evaluate all the testimony they had heard over the weeks. Expert testimony, for example, isn't automatically accepted as fact. The jury has to assess its credibility like any other witness. Similarly, testimony from government officials holds no more or less weight than anyone else's. Just because they're an official doesn't make them more credible automatically.
Important point.
And critically, witnesses who have been given immunity for their testimony, meaning, they won't be prosecuted for certain things in exchange for cooperating, they should be, quote, examined with greater care by the jury.
A necessary caution.
Definitely. The judge also reminded them, crucially, that the defendant was, quote, not required to testify. And absolutely no conclusion should be drawn from that decision. That's a cornerstone protection for the accused.
Yes, fundamental right.
And the jury was also explicitly told not to communicate about the case with anyone outside the courtroom. That includes, quote, on X, Instagram, or YouTube, emphasizing the need to avoid outside influence and bias, including, quote, implicit bias.
Which is harder than ever these days.
It really is. And perhaps the most critical instruction of all, the verdict, whatever it might be, must be, quote, unanimous. That is such a heavy burden for 12 people.
Immense pressure.
Now, you might think, okay, after days of testimony, a full weekend, these extensive instructions, the jury would settle in for a long, maybe quiet deliberation. But barely an hour into their closed-door discussions, something pretty significant and quite surprising happened.
Yeah, this was unexpected.
At 1:27 p.m., a note lands on the judge's bench. It reads, quote, "We have a juror, juror number 25, who we believe cannot follow your instructions." Just incredibly quick, right? Almost unprecedented to see a juror issue pop up so early in deliberations. It signals immediate tension inside that room.
Yeah, that development raises a huge question about the internal dynamics of jury deliberations, especially kicking off like that.
Yeah.
It suggests an immediate clash or maybe a fundamental misunderstanding right out of the gate.
Right.
Our source indicates the judge's initial response was quite cautious, reflecting just how delicate the situation is. He suggested they tell the jury something like, quote, "It is early, you're getting started. If there's a further issue, please let us know." This careful approach came after a discussion referencing a prior case, U.S. versus Baker, which apparently deals with the very complex rules around removing a juror who refuses to participate or follow instructions.
It's a real tightrope walk for the judge, isn't it? Trying to ensure fairness while managing the jury effectively.
Absolutely. He has to be very careful not to seem like he's influencing them.
So what does this all mean for the trial? Juror 25 is identified in our source material as a 51-year-old male who works as a scientist, holds a PhD in molecular biology, and has a strong European accent. Quite specific details. The judge ultimately sent a very neutral note back, which seems like a deliberate move, reminding every juror of their, quote, duty to deliberate and their obligation to follow my instructions on the law, and explicitly instructing them, quote, not to reveal any specifics about their deliberation in any future note.
Yeah, that last part is key. The judge wants to avoid any details leaking out that could somehow taint the process or look like he's intruding on their private discussions.
Makes sense.
Our source actually calls this juror a wild card and notes how significant this is, especially given how quickly the issue came up. An early indication of a juror allegedly unable or maybe unwilling to follow instructions, well, it could potentially create, quote, good grounds for any type of appeal by the defense should there be a conviction.
Right. It plants a seed of doubt.
Exactly. It casts a shadow, even if it gets resolved later. And this isn't even the first time a juror has been an issue in this trial. Earlier this month, remember, Juror 6 was dismissed over, quote, inconsistent disclosure about where he lives.
Ah, yes, I remember that.
So this pattern probably means the judge is treading incredibly carefully right now to ensure the absolute integrity of the process.
Understandably. Then, later that same day, another note came from the jury. 2 more questions, giving us another little peek into their internal process.
Okay.
One asked, if an individual asks for a controlled substance and the person hands it over, is it distribution?
So they're grappling with the specifics.
Exactly. It immediately tells you they're wrestling with those specific legal definitions and how they apply to the evidence they heard. The second part of the note just indicated they would end deliberations for the day at 5:00 p.m. Standard enough.
Right.
The judge, in a move that's pretty common in these situations, responded by just pointing them back to the jury charge, essentially telling them, the answers are in the instructions I already gave you, reinforcing that the judge won't interpret facts for them. That's their job.
Standard procedure keeps the judge out of the factual debate.
Exactly. Now, our source also provides this unique, almost palpable peek into the mindset of a seasoned defense attorney waiting for a jury verdict in a huge trial like this.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the speaker, with 25 years of trial experience, describes the situation of closing arguments ending on a Friday and then the jury getting the judge's big charge on Monday. That creates a whole weekend for information to just sit there, settle in, for better or worse.
Yeah. And what's really fascinating here is the attorney's perspective, that the very last thing the jury hears before they go into that room is the judge's instruction on the law. And they argue these instructions are often, quote, oddly specific. And they tend to be drafted in a way that, while it's meant to be legally neutral, can maybe inadvertently favor the prosecution's framework.
How so?
Well, he argues it potentially overshadows the defense's powerful, often more emotionally resonant closing arguments.
The strategic challenge, right? Knowing the jury goes into that room with the prosecution's burden of proof and all those specific legal definitions ringing freshest in their ears, that makes sense. A real challenge. He also touches on why defense attorneys universally dislike RICO charges. He says it's, quote, so incredibly confusing for juries, and honestly, sometimes for lawyers too, to navigate properly.
They are complex.
But here's the critical, often unspoken element that our source brings to light. Lawyers are, quote, not allowed to tell the jury the penalty somebody is facing if they're convicted.
Right, that's a standard rule.
But it's particularly impactful here because, as our source explains, if the U.S. proves a RICO conviction, quote, they can go back later and say, Judge, that is a corrupt organization. Take it down brick by brick, and we need to get all their assets and all their money.
The forfeiture aspect.
Exactly. And the defense was explicitly shut down when they tried to bring this potential financial motivation, this massive asset forfeiture, to the jury's attention, which significantly limits their ability to argue about the full scope of what's truly at stake for Combs.
Yeah, that absolutely highlights the broader, almost existential implications of a RICO conviction. It goes far beyond just the immediate criminal charges and potential prison time. It allows for asset forfeiture, yes, but it also enables the government to literally, quote, dismantle an entire alleged enterprise, stripping away not just someone's freedom, but the very foundation of their business, their wealth. It's really a legal nuclear option.
Wow.
Designed to wipe out the financial underpinnings of organized crime, which is why it's such an incredibly high-stakes charge here.
And the attorney emphasizes that for a defense lawyer, the, quote, most nervous moments, they aren't during the fiery opening or closing statements, not even during a tough cross-examination. No, it's during the, quote, eternity of waiting for that verdict to be read. He describes this immense, almost suffocating tension when the jury finally comes back, a feeling he describes as the single most nerve-wracking moment for any defense attorney.
I can only imagine.
And in a moment of just raw, candid honesty regarding the ultimate verdict itself, he openly admits, quote, I don't know. I really don't know. That raw uncertainty just underscores the completely unpredictable nature of jury trials, especially ones of this magnitude and public interest.
Yeah, you just never know what 12 people will decide behind closed doors.
So where does this leave us in this fascinating deep dive? We've explored how the prosecution and defense have presented these starkly different realities, how the labyrinthine legal definitions given by the judge frame the jury's momentous task, and the immediate intense pressure already unfolding within that deliberation room. This case, it just continues to be a profound test of our legal system, doesn't it? Playing out in the full glare of intense public fascination with the fates of so many hanging in the balance.
It really does. And as we've delved into these intricacies, the legal definitions, the huge burden of proof, the unpredictable dynamics within a jury, it really makes you consider, how might our very understanding of what justice truly means, how might that evolve when it's confronted with the complex realities of the courtroom and, the intense public scrutiny that surrounds a high-profile trial like this one?
That is definitely something to think about long after this deep dive ends. Until next time, keep that curiosity well fed.